Please give your warmest welcome to Matthew Geraths.
It's the beginning of summer. This is the summer before I go into high school. I'm 14, and I just sat down in a group circle with a bunch of teenagers and one youth pastor. His name was Dan. You see, recently I had just made some new friends, and they invited me to my first ever Christian church lock-in, which I found out is an event where they lock a gaggle of kids and a 20-something youth pastor in a church basement overnight. In a way, it's kind of like a slumber party, but Jesus is invited. So we're in this circle to, as the pastor said, rap scripture. But I also have a sneaking suspicion that this is some kind of intervention for us outsiders. So the pastor begins and talks a little bit about the nature of sin and what the Bible has to say about that. And at some point, he looks at me and goes, "Well, what do you think?" Now, there are 3 things no one in this room knows about me. First, I went to Catholic school, so I know myself some scripture. Second, I do not believe in said scripture. And third, I love to debate. So I begin. And I just go to town on Preacher Man Dan. And the look on his face is priceless. I mean, he's just befuddled. And it must have been about halfway through my lecture on why sodomy is so misunderstood. Catholic. That I catch a glimpse at the single most beautiful girl I had ever seen. And in that moment, I could only think one thing. She's an angel. I mean, there, sitting across from me, was this girl with long blonde hair. And I mean like Christian long, like past the butt long. And she had these sparkly eyes and this coy smile as she looked at me. Now, I've lost my spot because I am all sorts of Twitter-pated right now. But no sooner does that moment happen that I snap out of it because I realize I have no chance with this girl. You see, I was looking at this cute girl next door, Christian. What she was looking at was this little skater punk who embodied all the worst 90s trends you can think of. I had Eddie Furlong's haircut from Terminator 2, Judgment Day. You know the one. It grows down like this, and I'd always be like, "Sup?" Which I continue to do after my hair was short. I wore ridiculously large skater pants, which I held up not with a belt, but with a plastic bag because I thought that was cool. And my favorite shirt at the time had written on it, "Drop your pants, let's go bowling," which I bought at a ska concert that my big brother Tom took me to. In other words, this was not gonna happen. I mean, I looked around that circle at all these clean-cut kids, and I was reminded of that Sesame Street song, you know the one, "Which one of these things is not like the other?" But it wasn't just an odd coupling. I had a bigger problem. I had no game. And when I say I have no game, I mean none. Up to this point, every experience I had with someone I liked had been an epic fail. For example, the first time I tried to kiss someone I really liked, we were sitting on the floor in her bedroom listening to Here Comes Your Man by the Pixies. It's the 90s. And she looks at me and says, "Have you ever kissed anyone?" To which I replied, "Oh, yeah, lots." So she leaned in and kissed me, and then immediately pulled back and go, "No." "No, you have not." Which was true. When it came to romance, I was a hopeless romantic. Nay, I was a hopeful romantic. Unfortunately, I was also a horny 14-year-old. You see, I had all these big feelings, but as a guy, when I would try to express them, all girls heard were lines. Again, as a guy, nobody was coaching me on how to articulate myself, express myself in a way that was authentic. Given the way I had looked at the time and the feelings I was trying to express, I never felt understood. In other words, I felt trapped. So imagine my surprise after the circle breaks up when that girl comes walking up to me and she says, "Hey, I'm Stephanie. I really thought what you said was interesting. Would you like to continue this conversation in the stairwell behind the altar?" I'm going to model my reaction. Nothing came out. So we're sitting in this stairwell, away from everybody, well, except for God. And we were sitting so close that our knees accidentally touched. And we just talked. I found out that she was actually questioning her faith, which is why she was interested in what I had to say. I learned that she was a few years older than me, which was really important because she could drive and had her own car. And in this conversation, there was this quiet moment where we're just making googly eyes at each other. And she looks at me and she asks, "What are you thinking?" Now, what I was thinking is, "Oh my God, you're beautiful, and this is amazing, and how do I not mess this up?" But what I said and did was as follows. This. I thought I was performing a textbook romantic kiss. But here's the problem. When you close your eyes, you tend to miss. So what actually happened was I licked her cheek. Much to my surprise, she gave me another chance. And thus began my first major romance. Over the next 4 months, it just grew and grew. I said, "I love you" for the first time. I made out on a regular basis. I saw breasts. It was amazing. And around the 5-month anniversary, we decided we were going to take our relationship to the next level. And so we lied to our parents. I think I said, I was going to spend the weekend with some friends, and I'm sure she did the same. But what we were really going to do was have a romantic getaway at her family's northern Wisconsin cottage. To have the sexual intercourses. And it was perfect. It was your quintessential North Wisconsin cottage on a lake. It's December, so everything's just drenched in snow. This cottage had a fireplace and these big windows that overlooked the frozen lake. And I went all out. We had a fancy dinner with candles, and afterward we knew it's time. And so Stephanie said, well, I need to use the bathroom. And so she went into the bathroom and then came out, and she had a towel, which she laid down in front of the fire we had made, which was a little confusing to me. I mean, I remember thinking, like, really? You think I'm going to sweat that much? You are overestimating my stamina. You see, Stephanie and I had about the same amount of sexual experience. And what's worse is I had even less sexual knowledge. And that knowledge mostly came from my big brother, Tom. When I had braces, Tom used to have to drive me to the orthodontist, and it was during those car rides that he would teach me about the ladies. And to be fair, Tom was the first person to teach me how important respect was. And his pearls of wisdom ranged from very practical to, well, really, I'm still trying to figure some of it out. For example, I remember him telling me, when you drop someone off, wait until they get inside. It's respectful, and it shows that you care. I was like, okay, that makes sense. On this side, I remember once he told me, sex is done when her fingers start tapping on your back like this. Some of you know that's true. I also think Tom was purposely misinforming me. And I suspect the reason why was, I think it was an attempt to protect me from myself. Because I remember distinctly him saying, oh, sex is terrible. If it was like what you see in the movies, everybody'd be doing it. And of course, I passed that gem on. And in hindsight, now I understand the sympathetic look I got from some people. The only other sex ed I had was from Catholic school, and that consisted of separating the boys and girls. They gave me a comb and said hair would be growing in new places. Which, we'll leave that alone. But this is what I'm working with. So it's time. We kiss, we undress. Stephanie lays down, and while I know I have no idea what I'm doing, I believe in my heart that my love and desire will effortlessly carry us through this magical moment. And I know this to be true because the mixtape I made for this special occasion started playing the perfect song. Dave Matthews, Crash Into Me. The 90s. Which is actually kind of an appropriate description because the way Stephanie was on the ground, she hadn't bent her knees. She kind of laid in a flat triangle. And I think I stabbed her thigh a couple of times. And then I heard, ow, we are done. I'm confused. I know that I'm done. But really, I'm confused. And we handled it like all teenagers. We didn't talk about it. We went to bed. And in fact, the drive home, we really didn't talk at all. The only thing I remember her saying, she didn't even look up at the road, or up away from the road, And she said, hey, next time can you try to be a little better? So now my heart's broken. I'm still confused, and now I feel the warm wash of shame and embarrassment. And I had questions, obviously. So that night, I was hanging out with my other big brother, Billy, and my best friend, Mary Pat. And I described to them how everything played out, step by step. And, we got to laugh about it. Well, actually, they were rolling on the ground in tears. I was laughing a lot less. And I remember my brother, Billy, saying, like, you're supposed to lose your virginity. Who dents it? And Mary Pat points and goes, this guy. Needless to say, I did not get my answers. And I realized, well, I should go to the other person that was there. So the next day, Stephanie and I met at this park that we used to go make out at. And I had a list of questions, handwritten. I had nice handwriting. And of course, the first question is, did we have sex? And so we sat on the swings like that, those like really hard rubber swings with those big chain link that always pinch the skin. Yeah. It's foreshadowing. So I don't get to ask my questions because Stephanie ends the relationship. Yeah. The worst part about a breakup like that? When one person's old enough to drive and the other is not? The longest car ride home of your life. Now this night, I am just a hot mess. You know that ugly cry that's a good mixture of like shame and sad and a little rage? That's me at this moment. And it was actually in that moment that I started to get this insight, almost a clarity into why so many guys in my life acted the way they did. You know how so many guys, they cleave away their vulnerable selves and put on this mask of masculinity that is this distorted version of tough and stoic and even a little angry, right? Like I had worn my heart on my sleeve and it just got trashed. I mean, just stomped on. And in that moment, I think for just a second, I started to understand the origins or the epistemology of that guy code, bros before hoes. And what I mean by that was, in that moment, I realized I had a choice. It would have been so easy for me to take what I was feeling and project it onto Stephanie and really girls and women in general. And it would have been such an easy way to take this, transform it into blame, and put it away. But ultimately, I knew that wasn't who I was. And so I decided to do something more productive with all that energy. So I sat down at my desk and I wrote a poem. And the title was Dented, Not Broken. And in the end, I think like a lot of people, I walked away from the experience with a slightly bruised ego, a dented virginity, but I also walked away holding on to my romantic heart. Happy Valentine's.